Good evening and a warm welcome to all of you who have joined us for this fifth session of Masterclass, Creating Corporate Entrepreneurs. I'm Dr. Neeraj Mankad, Assistant Dean, Flame University, and also faculty at School of Business. As many of you may be aware, some of you may have joined in for the first time. The masterclass from Flame University is an online learning suite that we have crafted, especially for all of you to come and try and understand some of the contemporary issues that we face in the corporate world with some of our expert faculty here. So I'm quite pleased to welcome today Professor Bharat Damani, who will be the host of the session today. Professor Bharat is the chair of Department of Entrepreneurship at Flame University, PhD from IIT Bombay, and a social entrepreneur academician himself. He will be hosting our young blood, as we would like to call him, Professor Amarpreet Singh Ghura, who is a faculty of entrepreneurship here. So without much ado, I would hand it over to Professor Bharat Damani to take this session further. But before we do that, a quick heads up to all the attendees here. We have disabled the chat option in case you would wish to ask any questions. Please feel free to use the Q&A box. We will be, after Professor Gua's session, we will be having the Q&A taken over by Professor Damani. So good luck and over to you, Bharat sir.
Thank you, Dr. Neeraj. It is a real pleasure and honor to be part of the Flame Master webinar series. Today we have with us Dr. Amarpreet Singh Ghura, who will be talking on creating corporate entrepreneurs. Amarpreet comes with a family business background, and prior to joining Flame, he's worked or been associated with institutions like IIM Ahmedabad, IIM Calcutta, and also the Entrepreneurship Development Institute of India. He's an award-winning researcher with publications in journals like Marketing Mastermind, Journal of Entrepreneurship and Innovation in Emerging Economies, and with IIM Calcutta. He's a respected case writer as well, and his cases are being used by various institutions. They've been published in IIM Ahmedabad Case Center, at IIM Bangalore, with Harvard Business Publishing, and also Ivy Publishing. He is currently associated with two startups in the logistics and medical space. We are very fortunate to have Dr. Amarpreet with us today to share his experience and insights on creating corporate entrepreneurs, and more importantly, how an organization can prepare for it. Over to you, Dr. Amarpreet.
Thank you, Professor Bharat, and good afternoon, everyone. And thank you once again, Professor Bharat, for inviting me. And I'm absolutely delighted to interact with the lovely audience on the area of corporate entrepreneurship. But before I start sharing my thoughts on corporate entrepreneurship, I just want to wish that all of you and your dear ones are safe at the moment, and we do take care of ourselves. And what I've done is I've prepared some insights in the area of corporate entrepreneurship, which I would be sharing today. But before that, I just wanted a few minutes to share my thoughts on the current situation of COVID-19. And then I'll get back to the topic of creating corporate entrepreneurs. So out of curiosity, a couple of questions which I thought is I'll share, which comes to my mind in the current COVID situation. So some of these questions are just to understand how bad is the impact on the economy, and what are the scenarios of recovery. I mean, these are some things which are actually been bothering me for a long time. Now, in reality, we've been looking at various projections on various different forums now. But what I understand is None of these projections are going to answer our questions, what I just spoke about, because the trajectory for the COVID is still unknown. And the reality is that no single number can capture the impact of COVID. And what I've been observing in last 3 odd months is that I've seen different trends in different industries now. So just day before yesterday, if I share some examples, uh, Tata Motors had an announcement saying of removing almost 1100 odd people, wherein I look at the other sector, insurance companies, Agon Life Insurance, recruiting almost 400 people in last 3 months. On the other hand, Asian Paints making an announcement that we would be increasing the remuneration part, the salary of the employees, because we need to boost the morals of the employee now. So it's a mixed response what I've been looking at when I look at the situation now. So coming back, I'll talk about the topic and how relevant it is. So before I could start the topic of creating corporate entrepreneurs, I'll take a quick poll now. So the poll is basically for you to identify yourself. So if you could tell us something about yourself, whether you are a student, a professional, an entrepreneur, or an academician, so that accordingly we would then talk for the webinar. Okay. So we've got the results. So we've got a mixed response now. So good. We've got a mixed response with almost students, professionals, entrepreneurs, and academicians to who are a part of this particular webinar now. So the order of the presentation would be in this format. Just a minute. So the order of the presentation would be in this particular format. Just a second. Yeah, there was some issues with the laptop. So this is the order of the presentation now. So to begin with, because we've got people from all from different diverse backgrounds now, so we've got this presentation which I'll be talking on. So this is relevant to the practitioners, to the academicians, to the students, and also to people who are entrepreneurs now. So your next 40 minutes is something which I need to make very useful in terms of giving you the insights. So the order for the presentation goes this way. I'll be talking about a small introduction of this topic of corporate entrepreneurship, and I'll be sharing that why did I choose this particular topic and how is this relevant to the present situation of COVID. Moving further, I'll talk about what are the benefits of corporate entrepreneurship and what are some fundamental factors at the moment which are present in the Indian context today, which makes corporate entrepreneurship very relevant. So a couple of these factors which we'll be focusing on talks about the brain drain phenomena, which has been seen in US, but now today we see that very much in India. We talk about employee engagement as a crisis and how corporate entrepreneurship could be a tool to actually benefit from this crisis. Younger Indian demographics is another fundamental factor which is very particular to India, and we'll talk about it, that how corporate entrepreneurship can be used by organizations. And then changing work environment, what has actually been the work environment today with the younger demographics in the country, millennials and generations that have entered the workforce. So what are they demanding and what is the present work situation? We'll talk about this. And then I'll talk about some real life examples in the Indian organizations where they've been practicing corporate entrepreneurship, because there's a lot of literature which talks about corporate entrepreneurship programs in relation to 3M, Apple, Google, but there's hardly any literature which talks about the Indian organization. So our past research for last 3 years, what I've been doing, I'll talk about a lot of insights and the data we've collected and what or how Indian organizations are operating their programs in the context of corporate entrepreneurship. We'll talk about that. And
So, Ghura, are you sharing the screen? We are unable to see that.
okay, is it fine now? Maybe there was some issue, and is that fine now?
It's visible now. Thank you.
Okay, so apologies for the same. And we'll be talking about the corporate entrepreneurship programs, what we just covered. And then the key part of the presentation, the webinar topic, what we're talking about, how should one measure the readiness for the organization? So we've seen and interacted with a lot of corporates today who actually want to do corporate entrepreneurship, but in real terms, they seriously don't know what is the way ahead. So how do you measure the readiness for your organization? We'll talk about it. We'll talk about the tools available and how should one use that particular tool. We will talk about this. So to begin with, before I introduce the topic of corporate entrepreneurship, I'll talk about one simple question which has always been relevant in the corporate world, and which I'm sure is also relevant today, but maybe in a different context. And that's where I believe this topic of corporate entrepreneurship is very relevant. Uh, the top management always of either of the organization is keen to explore areas of new revenues. So where would the new revenue come in from? That's number one. Or how should we tap new sources of revenue? So these are some questions which has always been there, and I'm sure will always still continue for the top management of the organizations. And in the current context, if you look at organizations who are not looking at newer sources of revenues, but who are also looking at how could we either get into incremental innovations leading to some cost savings. For all these three questions, what I just spoke about, the only answer what comes to my mind, the logical answer what comes to my mind is corporate entrepreneurship. So we'll talk about it. So corporate entrepreneurship, also known as entrepreneurship. So this word was basically coined in the 70s now. So the literature what I have available talks about Gifford and Elizabeth Pinchot using this word for the first time in 1978. And moving further, if I have to give you the simple definition for corporate entrepreneurship, I would say it's a process through which different teams inside an organization would come, conceive, foster, launch, and manage a new business. That could be a startup, which is having a different business from the existing business of the parent organization, but by using the resources given by the parent organization. So I can say in simple terms, it is like having a startup within a formal big organization. So that is what to me is corporate entrepreneurship. Now, before I move further, I said that this webinar is for the audience, which are students, which is practitioners, and we also have academicians. So I'll just quickly in next 1 minute talk about starting from the mid 1970s, how has the area of corporate entrepreneurship evolved over a period of time. So if you look at starting from 1981 till 1994, we've got an ample research available, which is basically focused on the area of individual entrepreneurs now. So at this particular facet, people have tried to understand what are the entrepreneurial characteristics and what are the organizational how organizations emphasize on entrepreneurs and their individual characteristics, recognition, support, and so on and so forth. Next, we've got a different area of research, within the gamut of corporate entrepreneurship, which is in talking about formation of new corporate ventures. So 73 to 1994, this is where the focus has been. And the focus here basically talks about different types of new ventures and they are fit within the corporations now. And how do organizations enable the internal environment now? So this is one of the areas which has been explored. Then we've got entrepreneurial organization as one of the areas which has been explored since 1976 to 1995. And this area basically talks about characteristics of organizations now. So why, if I have to be very precise, why could only organizations like Google, 3M and Apple could take corporate entrepreneurship to the different heights, wherein they could actually use this to create new industries for themselves now. And the last and the latest what we have in the area of corporate entrepreneurship is something called as corporate accelerators. The recent research what we've got is dated 2019. And this basically talks about corporate entrepreneurship is the new future or the new way ahead for corporate entrepreneurship. It's a new type of corporate entrepreneurship available through which organizations try to tap early and they absorb innovations or they get an access to the potential disruptive ventures. And we've got a lot of organizations who are actually getting into this. Reliance Industries could be one of the Indian examples. We've got Johnson and Johnson who's actually doing this. So accelerator is one of the mechanisms being used by organizations today in order to pursue corporate entrepreneurship now. So this is how the area has been evolved in starting from mid 1975 to 2019. I'll next talk about just 4 dimensions of corporate entrepreneurship. Now, this is just to give you a basic insight that what is important when you look at corporate entrepreneurship. So if I look at the dimensions, the first dimension what comes to my mind is proactiveness. And proactiveness to me is nothing but it talks about it's an opportunity seeing forward-looking perspective within the organizations, and it is characterized by introduction of newer products, newer services, and well before the competitors do it. So to me, that's what is proactiveness, and that's the first dimension to corporate entrepreneurship. Second one here talks about innovations, and innovations to me is nothing but it is a predisposition to engage in creativity and experimentation, and through the introduction of products and services and experimentations what the organizations do. When I talk about innovations and that too through the corporate entrepreneurship mechanism, 2 organizations which I recall is Procter and Gamble, and we referred to one of the papers in 2006 which talked about that in Procter and Gamble, innovation is the lifeblood for the company, and the other is McDonald's. We referred a paper, Nagpal 2013, which said that innovation is a matter of life and death in McDonald's now. So this is the second dimension I had to talk about. The third dimension I just want to introduce you to is self-renewal. So it is basically the strategy formulation and reorganization and the organizational change part. Here I would like to quote 2 very relevant examples now. So at any point of time, you can look at the Fortune 500 companies list. So there was a recent survey being done wherein list of Fortune 500 companies, which was there in 1970, was compared by the list of Fortune 500 companies in 1997, and they saw that almost 80% of the companies didn't even exist. Now, these companies didn't exist not in the list, but the companies were not even there alive. The companies were dead. And similar, we got another paper from Deloitte. And the paper was a working paper by Deloitte in 2015. I remember this paper did a similar survey, but they looked at Fortune 500 companies list of 1995 and compared it to the list of Fortune 500 companies in 2015. And they saw 88% of the companies were not there. They were not existing. So that's what is the third dimension to corporate entrepreneurship, that it helps you to renew your organizations. And the last one I need to talk about is risk taking. So corporate entrepreneurship is all about taking the risk. It is all about the experimentation. But the key here for risk taking is that take calculated risk. So moving ahead, I have to share some benefits of corporate entrepreneurship. People talk about why corporate entrepreneurship is being executed at organization, and most of the people whom I've met over the last 3 years only talk about profitability. But that's not the only case. There's a big list of outcomes and benefits of corporate entrepreneurship, which I want to share with you. So I don't say that profitability is not good. Profit is the sole purpose for the organizations to exit, and profit is a good word. But there are various other aspects to this. So corporate entrepreneurship also helps you to gain knowledge for the future revenue streams, which is a very important thing for the top management, for the top CEOs today. Strategic renewal, what we just spoke about, someone who wants to foster innovation, that's one of the benefits. So you can foster the culture of innovation through corporate entrepreneurship within the organization. We've seen organizations who've experienced international success through corporate entrepreneurship. Enhancing the capabilities of the organization is another benefit of corporate entrepreneurship. Organizations have achieved different heights of growth and creating competitive advantage. We recently was looking at one of the readings from Harvard, which said that it's your employees who are the next competitive advantage for the people now. So that's where corporate entrepreneurship actually helps you to create a competitive advantage. So look at organizations like Google. Today, one of the competitive advantages what they have is the culture of corporate entrepreneurship, what they've created for themselves now. So moving next to a very specific part, but but one of the essential parts which I want to talk to you guys is even though corporate entrepreneurship was started in mid 1975s or mid 1970s in US, we never got any literature available on corporate entrepreneurship, or we never could get examples about Indian organizations. So last 3 years, we've been working on this area, and we've got some fundamental factors which I need to talk about, which says that these factors will actually make corporate entrepreneurship successful in the Indian scenario. And these factors are brain drain phenomena, the employee engagement crisis, the young Indian demographics what we have, and the overall changing work environment now. So I'll talk about each of these four areas separately. So when I talk about brain drain phenomena, I need to share this image with you. So I recall a very good image which talks about George Bush asking Bill Gates that the people of US are unemployed and you still continue to hire foreign engineers, and that too from India. And this is what Bill Gates answers him. He says that if we stop employing foreign engineers, especially from India, then there will be another Microsoft born in India. Now, this is one of the real examples, but at the same time, why did I talk about brain drain phenomena is brain drain phenomena today is not only there for US, even India has started to face the heat of the brain drain phenomena. I'll share a couple of organizations with you in the Indian context, which you could relate to with brain drain phenomena. So these are a couple of organizations I need to talk about. I'm sure all of us have heard about Flipkart, which got acquired by Walmart recently. Now, if you look at the history of the co-founders of Flipkart.com, I guess the Bansal brothers, Sachin Bansal and Binny Bansal, I guess both were from IIT Delhi. But before they could start Flipkart, both of them were working with Amazon. Second, I want to talk about Naukri.com, InfoEdge India Limited. If you look at the co-founders' history, Mr. Samji Bigchandani, one of the alumni of IIM Ahmedabad, was working with this company, Hindustan Milk Foods Manufacturers, and was specially working in the marketing department for Horlicks, I guess, which was then acquired by GSK, and now it's been acquired by HUL. So before he could actually start Naukri, he was working with this company. And the last example which just came to my mind is Infosys Limited. Now, if you look at the history of the founders of Infosys Limited, Nagavara Ramarao Narayan Murthy was an employee who left Patni Computer Systems and then he started Infosys. So can we say that without Patni, there would have not been Infosys now? So this is what I'm talking about, the brain-brain phenomena, which was once upon a time very relevant in the US context, but today India has started facing the heat of it. So today we've seen so many examples wherein the employees, they quit, and they quit not only to become entrepreneurs, but they actually quit, start an organization, and they become a direct competitor to the same organization where they were working. So this is one of the facets which I wanted to talk about, that this can be taken care of if corporate entrepreneurship as a culture is been given to the employees within the organization. Second, I need to talk about employee engagement, and I'll then link this to what is happening to employee engagement, not only worldwide, but in specific to India. So we'll talk about it. Employee engagement, if I talk about, is a term which is used in the, and it's a popular term used in the human resource development field, started somewhere in 1990 by Khan. And if I have to define what is corporate entrepreneurship, Khan made it very simple. He says that any person who's working within the organization, and if he's expressing and employing himself physically, cognitively, and emotionally, only then you can say that the particular employee is engaged. Only the person working with you in a physical manner, wherein cognitively and emotionally is not there, cannot be considered as an employee engaged. So which is fair enough, but if you look at employee engagement after its evolution since 1990, where are we today at the world level when it comes to the employee engagement numbers, or where is India today? That's where I talk about that employee engagement has already been proved with empirical evidence that it would always benefit the organizations. But let me share some real numbers with you. We came across the Gallup study very recently, and Gallup study here shared couple of numbers of different economies now. So overall employee engagement rate for the world today is approximately, I guess, 32 or 33 odd percent. For US as a country, the rate is 13%. And when it comes to India, the employee engagement rate is just 9%. Yes, it's just 9%. And the worst part here is that these rates have been constant for last 1 decade. There has been no change in these rates, what we just spoke about of different economies now. Now, what happens here is the moment we talk about low employee engagement rates, uh, this has a direct cost to the economy. Now, if it is having a cost to the economy, I'm sure it is also having a cost to the organizations who have these low employee engagement rates. We've got some data which talks about what is the cost the economy bears for the low engagement rates. We got some data for a paper from Bates 2004, which talks about that the low employee engagement rate is leading to loss of productivity, and it is costing almost $300 billion per annum to US. And we've got another paper from Hooper 2006, which talks about Australia, the loss of productivity due to employee engagement is costing the economy almost $31 billion per year. So this is where corporate entrepreneurship, if given to the employees, can increase the employee engagement rates. Now, in fact, the past study what we've been doing for last 3 years, we also wrote one of the papers which is published with the IIM Calcutta Working Paper Series. We did some research and we could look at the antecedents of employee engagement and antecedents of corporate entrepreneurship. There's an overlap, they're almost the same. So that's where we say that corporate entrepreneurship today is a tool for employee engagement within the organizations. Moving to the third facet in the Indian context, which I need to talk about. India is blessed to have the younger demographics today. So we'll talk about it. How is this relevant to corporate entrepreneurship? So millennials and generations that have entered the global workforce, and India has also witnessed the same. If I have to define millennials is, I'll define people born between 1980 to 1995. Generation Z would be people between 1995 to 2015. Now, combined together, this has 65% of the India's workforce today, of the population today. So they've entered the workforce, which is good. But at the same time, the moment they've entered the workforce, they've experienced a different environment. And this different environment, what I'm talking about, is that fields like law, fields such as education, fields such as management, fields such as medicine are no more lucrative. They are no more an easy success to your careers. People have witnessed a different environment today. Moving next, the younger workforce, what we're talking about, comes with a good education, and they are considering employment, which could offer them good work culture, which could offer them transparency, which could offer them investments in one's own self. The younger workforce today comes with a new mindset. They do not believe in competition, rather they believe in collaboration. They want things like transparency. They want things like autonomy. They want flexible working environment. They want trust. They want opportunities. They want to take risk within the organization. They want to innovate into the organization. They want to experiment in the organization. Now, if you look at what we spoke for next 5 minutes or the previous 5 minutes in the context of the younger Indian workforce, all of the things what has been mentioned there are nothing but these are the characteristics of an entrepreneur. And that's where I make an argument saying that organizations who are having the millennials and the generation Z, it is an apt factor for you to actually practice corporate entrepreneurship. This is what the younger workforce today is looking for. Moving next, I'll talk about what is the current change in the work environment, what we all are experiencing. One, there's been a change at the economic and the social front. Now, this economic and social front, what I'm talking about is today employees who have been working, whether they are millennials or whether they are the generation previous to millennials, there have been a shift at the economic and the social front. Today, loyalty at workplace is something which people don't look for. Moving next, people are skeptical about employment. And that's where, especially if I talk about the younger workforce, they do not want to take up jobs. They believe in multiple careers. They do not believe in loyalty. They want careers which could actually allow them to learn. And if you look at all of these social and economical changes wherein people don't talk about loyalty and people being sacked, this has led to a very strong feeling that the younger workforce doesn't believe in the idea of one job, one career. So this is something which we need, all major organizations are going through. And that's where I believe corporate entrepreneurship, if being given by organizations or practiced by organization, can be helpful at a various high level. Moving further, I will talk about some examples because when you look at the literature of corporate entrepreneurship, you've heard ample examples, 3M, you've talked about Apple, you've talked about Google, people talking about how 3M could actually make up those post-it notes by art fry, what we use on our day-to-day life. And 3M having the culture of organizational slack, wherein employees been given a lot of time to wherein 20% of the time wherein he could work on his own ideas. But here I have some experience of mine which we've collected in last 3 years. I'll talk about what Indian organizations are doing, and it's really mind-boggling because every organization has a different perspective towards corporate entrepreneurship, and that's what they're doing. So Hindustan Unilever is one of the organizations whom we interacted with, and we learned that Hindustan Unilever has invested into a lot of startups, and the organization has a policy wherein they allow their employees who are at the mid-range, at the management training level, let us say between the age of 30 to 35, these employees are being told to go for a period of 1 year and work with the startups now. So the employee continues to be the employee of HUL. He continues to get the benefits and perks from Unilever, but he works with the startup for a period of 1 year. And when we further probed why is this been happening now, so one of the reasons we got is they said that the employee, when he works with an startup, so he moves away from an organization who has surplus of resources to an organization who's innovating on day-to-day basis and struggling through the crunch of resources. So he learns those innovation as a behavior, and then we want the employee to come back and implement those innovations at Unilever's. Second, one of the organizations we researched on, in fact, we also wrote one case on this organization which has been published. So here we've got a story of India First Life Insurance, which says that there was the new CEO who's joined the organization in 2015. And after joining, a new vision was given to the organization, saying that the organization wants to, in next 5 years, that is by 2020, want to be in the top 5 in the players who are in the insurance industry. And that's where the head HR whom we interviewed came up with an idea. He says that if I want my organization to be in the top 5, we will have to innovate. And he said that we are governed by IRDAI. That means whatever innovations we do would also be replicated by our competitors. So he says in that context, we do not want one small team who would innovate. If we want to be from position 19 to position 5 by 2020, all 1,400 employees in the organizations have to innovate. And that's where they implemented the corporate entrepreneurship culture. They made a drastic change in the organization, and that's where they created capabilities within the organizations. They created a new competency framework so that they could now get KRAs being allotted to the innovations done by the employees. Next is Mahindra and Mahindra Financials and SR Oil. Now, we also happen to speak to the officials in past 3 years with these two organizations. Mahindra and Mahindra Finance has been doing corporate entrepreneurship for last 8 to 9 odd years. And SR Oil and Mahindra and Mahindra Finance, one thing we got similar is that one thing unique to this organization is that how do they identify the areas where they want ideas. So what I learned during the course of research was the head HR sends an email to the SBU CEOs of these organizations, group company organizations, asking for top 3 challenges. And each CEO of the SBU sends the top 3 business challenge, what they're facing to the head HR. And this has been shared with the top management of the organization. And the company then comes with only 3 areas where they invite ideas from their employees. Now, this was something amazing. We never heard about this in the entire literature of corporate entrepreneurship. So the organization would define the themes that they only want employees to give ideas only on the themes what is been identified by the organization. And these themes change year on year on year. Moving next, we also did some interactions with the executives at J&J India. And we learned that J&J India has different models for corporate entrepreneurship. So they have model in India, which is more focused on the incremental innovations being done. But at the same time, they also have a different level of corporate entrepreneurship in US and China, wherein they work on creation of new industries. And J&J, if you Google out, also adopts the accelerator model of corporate entrepreneurship. We've got another organizations like Marico, RPG Group, I remember in 2016 made a statement, a bold statement, which said that we've kept aside 100 crores as a innovation fund. So now employees who want to leave us to have their own startups, now they get an opportunity to share their ideas within the organization, so that if the idea is viable as per the metrics of the organization, they continue to be an entrepreneur in the organization. And the company at the start kept a fund of 100 crores for the innovations. Reliance Industries, another example wherein a lot of accelerator programs being run by the organization to execute corporate entrepreneurship. So these were a couple of examples and real Indian scenario which I wanted to share with you guys. Moving next, if someone has to measure is their organization ready for corporate entrepreneurship? What is to be done and how it is to be done, and what are the antecedents what one should look at. So I'll just talk about in next 5 minutes about a few of the antecedents, and then we'll talk about how should one go about measuring the same. So these are 5 organizational dimensions and which are determinants of the corporate entrepreneurship environment. First is top management support. Now to me, if I have to explain you what top management support is, top management support in simplest terms is that an employee perceives within the organization that the organization is willing, that the employee should take up innovations, should take up creativity, he should behave like an entrepreneur. And to me, if I have to add on to this, any such initiative, it has to be started, it should actually come from the top bosses. The second one is work discretion. Now, work discretion, if I have to explain you in simple terms, is one of the important determinants which says that the employee feels that he has been given the autonomy, he's been allowed, or the organization would accept the failures of the employee. Now, this is what I mean by work discretion, that the employee should have the power to take the decisions. He should be allowed to delegate the work. Now, top management support and work discussion in the empirical research has a strong correlation to the entrepreneurial behavior within the organization. Third is rewards and reinforcement. So how do we give out a signal to the employees? So rewards is one of the good mechanisms which organizations could use. So organizations using rewards for the employees who use innovation, who behave like entrepreneurs, is one of the third dimensions one should actually look at. Fourth is time availability. Time availability here in simple terms means that in the entire work schedule what an employee has, uh, is time being given to employee so that he could actually innovate, or the entire time has been used for the daily routine work. We've got a lot of good examples of 3M and Google here. Google, I believe in the offer letter says that 20% of the official time is to be used for ventures or ideas which the employee wants, he wants to pursue. Now this is what we mean by time availability. And the last one, organizational boundaries. Now organizational boundaries to me is nothing but it talks about how does an employee perceives that how flexible the organization boundaries are, because lot of information which flows within the organization or which flows from outside the organization. Now this is an information which gets a lot of opportunity for the organization if someone wants to have corporate entrepreneurship as a culture. Now these are 5 dimensions as per me which is very much been empirically proved that it's conducive for a corporate entrepreneurship environment. And that's where I wanted to talk about this, so that these are the 5 things what I believe one should have in their organization if they're thinking of corporate entrepreneurship. So before I move on, I'll just have a quick poll now, and it's related to these 5 dimensions. And I would want you guys to take up this poll. And if you guys could say which among these 5 dimensions which we just spoke about is been practiced in your own organization. Now it's a multiple choice thing. You may have more than one as your answer. So we're getting the results as of now. Okay. So we got the results almost 52% of the people said that they've already been practicing top management support, and 44% talking about work discretion. 41% said that we've already have reward and reinforcement, and uh, time availability, we've got 33% of the audience talking about it, and organizational boundary almost talk about the organizational boundaries is 11%. So moving on to the next and the last part of the presentation. So I just want to make you guys go through the area. How could one measure the readiness of the organization in the corporate entrepreneurship context now? So that's where we'll talk about an instrument, which is a corporate entrepreneurship assessment instrument. How should one implement this within the organization? So the first aspect here talks about distributing the corporate entrepreneurship assessment instrument. So this is to be distributed across the organization when you want to actually take up a survey. Couple of things to be taken care of. Higher the number of people who take up the survey, the better it is, because people who are left out during the survey would actually not be supportive when you actually try to implement the culture of corporate entrepreneurship. So when you distribute the instrument, see to it that maximum number of people could participate, the better it is. Now, one of the aspects to this instrument is that we can also do individual scoring. So the moment this survey has been done, the individual scores can be shared with the individual at this very moment, and you could talk about him that what is the perspective of the individual towards the 5 dimensions what we spoke about, and you can talk about it that what he feels that is the organization ready about implementing the corporate entrepreneurship. And third is organizational scoring. So we also have a facet in this instrument that if we do not want the individual scoring, we could have an overall organization scoring with all the scores of different departments. So at organizational scoring, we look at the scores which has been achieved overall from different departments of the organization, and then we share these scores. And interpreting the scores, this instrument works on a 5-point Likert scale, wherein 5 is the highest rating and 1 is the lowest rating. So one could interpret the scores that higher the scores, the better it is. That means the organization is ready for corporate entrepreneurship. And lower the scores in either of the 5 dimensions, it talks about that what are the gaps within the organization and where the organization could work on. And the point of responsibility here talks about 2 major things, that whenever this instrument is being used to check the readiness of the organization, one needs to be very careful that whatever information has been collected need not be shared in the public domain. So that information is very much important and crucial for the organization. Second point of responsibility is either the organization can get this instrument used either by a consultant, or if the organization believes they could also form a group or a team. A team could be from different departments, and they can be empowered to undertake the particular survey. And once the survey has been collected, the organization can look at the scores, and then they could actually look at if there is any point of gaps. Now, gaps here basically means that out of the 5 dimensions what we spoke about, is there any area in the dimension which has received less scoring? And then the organization may take up the responsibility and can have a particular meeting with that particular department. Now, that's where the beauty of this instrument comes in, that it allows the organization to understand the gaps within the departments before they could actually execute the corporate entrepreneurship culture. So this is what I had to share with you guys, that what is corporate entrepreneurship? Second, what and how are Indian organizations using programs in the context of corporate entrepreneurship? And if you believe that, yes, whatever factors we spoke about, whether it's the employee engagement crisis or whether it is the Indian young demographics, which you want to benefit from, I believe you should take up this instrument, and you should actually do a small survey for your organization and see whether your organization is ready for corporate entrepreneurship. So over to you, Professor Damani. This was all I had to share with the audience. And thank you, all of you, for the support being given. So any question and answers, I'm open for it.
Yeah, thank you, Amarpreet. Really, in this short period, you have captured a lot of information and given a lot of insights based on your experience and the research work. We have quite a few questions which have come in. So we will try and cover all the questions, but considering the short time available, I hope we are able to cover most of them.
We will try.
So what I will do is I'll try and combine these questions and ask you as we are able to answer them.
Okay.
So the first one is, when is a good time for companies to initiate corporate entrepreneurship? And do you think there should be a budget allocated to it, or what kind of a budget should be allocated?
So it's a real, intelligent question, if I say, because now if you look at every organization, I would say, whether it's a huge organization, everyone starts small, and when they are small, they, without knowing, are practicing corporate entrepreneurship. So every startup today, if I say, is a corporate entrepreneurship venture to me, because all of them are focusing at the innovation. And gradually, after the success starts coming in, the focus moves away from the innovation towards the processes, because they want to sustain that innovation. So I would say the correct time is that early you start, the better it is, and you should always continue to have these innovations. Look at Google today, with almost 26,000 plus employees. Google still continues to have corporate entrepreneurship, and that's what has made Google what Google is today. And looking at the budget part, there's no thumb rule to it. Look at the way RPG Group started in India. They started with in 2016 with a budget of 100 crores kept aside only for innovations done by the employees now. So I would say higher the money allocated, the better it is. So, but I would say people can start with some initial amount, and then basis on their experience, they can actually increase the amount.
Okay, the next question is, don't you think that giving, let's say, a corporate entrepreneurship platform to employees will actually accelerate their exit plan and encourage them to start their own venture? So how do you ensure that the people who are involved in corporate entrepreneurship don't actually end up leaving your organization and starting something which ends up competing with you?
Now, two things here is that see, the person who has to leave would leave at any cost, whether you give him this or whether you don't give him this. But for me, what is more important here is that even one or two employees who have the potential to become an entrepreneur leaves your organization doesn't matter much. But for me, what is more important here is that this should be a rotational thing within the organization, that your policies should be so very benefiting the employees. Now, benefiting here, I means that having a transparent matrix for reward sharing. So let us say if the idea succeeds, if we decide in advance that these are the support which is to be given by the organization, and in return this is what the profit sharing would be. If we have these policies in place, I don't believe that employee would exit, because for one major reason, which we are forgetting, that corporate entrepreneurship gives you all the resources to be used, which I believe if an employee leaves would not be given by him. He will have to actually get into venture capitalist funding and so on and so forth. All these pains have been taken care of within the organization. And one more thing we should not forget: if the employee fails, he never loses his job. He continues to be an employee there. So I believe employee would not have an exit plan if we give him these things. No. I mean, my take on it is that no, he would not live in. Rather, this would, today the millennials are so very connected that if you give this culture to them, they talk about this to their friends, and they actually get talent to your organization.
Okay, a related question has come from Mr. Prem Kumar. And again, it's related to the role of HR and mistakes made by employees. So what role can the HR department play in creating a culture of corporate entrepreneurship in the organization? And especially when, if, in today's times, if employees make mistakes, then when you have a COVID kind of a situation where costs are very, very critical, if you make a mistake, there's the possibility of a huge loss in terms of expenses or time lost, opportunity lost. So that is another issue related to how the HR department can come in. At the same time, maybe one department could be encouraging corporate entrepreneurship or an entrepreneurial culture, but maybe another department is not in favor of it. So how do you tackle these internal issues? And how does HR really play a big role, or is it the business heads or the CEO who is supposed to play all these roles? So all these questions have come from Prem Kumar.
So it's a very interesting thing what is actually asked. Now, what I've learned over the period of past 3 years, what we've been interacting with and the best part is all the organizations which I named, almost we met the head HRs there. So what I've learned is that we need to understand who is the custodian of this culture now. Is it the CEO who's brought in the culture? Because at India First Life Insurance, they started with the new leadership coming in and a new vision coming in. Or is it the HR who is driving the culture now? So we need to understand who is more important and who is driving the force. To me, whether it is coming from the top management, the CEOs, or whether it is coming from the head HR plays a crucial role, because HR is the one point of contact who would actually be a single point and a single key who would be interacting between and connecting all the various departments. Second question asked was, what if a particular department is not going to be proactive into this? So for me, it's not about the departments. For me, it is those 5 dimensions what we spoke about. Now, these 5 dimensions are to be there within the organization. And then it could, if it's an organization with many SBUs, now they could start with one SBU and then they could gradually move to the other SBUs now. But for me, it's not the department which is more important, but it is those 5 dimensions within a particular organization. And then that's the way to take this ahead now.
Okay, I think we have time for just one last question. There are quite a few which we are not able to answer. So we will send the questions to you and maybe we could answer them separately. So just one last question. In today's technologically wired world where information is available, people are highly innovative. Can we say that long-term survival for long-term survival, is corporate entrepreneurship becoming a prerequisite?
I would say yes, because when I talk about corporate entrepreneurship, I would not say that this is something to be done for a year or 2. No, this is something which would have a very different impact in the organization in a positive way if it has been done for the longest or the highest point of time now. So I believe that organizations should continue doing this maybe for for almost till the time they exist. They should actually do this, is what I believe now. So it should not be done with the mindset maybe for 2, 3, 4, 5 years. No, it's something which is to be done throughout the life of the organization now.
Okay, thank you very much, Amarpreet, and your insights will definitely help the entrepreneurs and corporate executives who are with us today on the discussion to take it and implement it in their company.
Okay.
And with this, I think I'll hand over back to Neeraj. Like I said earlier, there are the other questions we'll send to you, and then we'll answer all those questions to the individual people who have asked them. Neeraj, over to you.
Thank you so much, Bharat, and that was a brilliant talk. Looking at the questions, and before we end, my apologies to all of you who have asked questions and have not been able to get answers on that. We'll make sure that you would be able to do that soon. But thank you once again for joining us in this webinar. Thank you, Bharat and Amarpreet, for graciously accepting our invitation to come over and talk about corporate entrepreneurship.
Thank you, sir. It was wonderful for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. And for all of you who have attended today, we'd like to present to you our next webinar on building a data-driven HR function. where myself and Professor Batra will be talking about how an organization can create an HR function that uses data rather than gut feeling in making decisions. And we present to you three different ways in which one can do that. So once again, thank you all of you. Thank you to both of you, Amarpreet and Bharat. And good evening to our attendees. Stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Goodbye.
Goodbye.